There was a woman in her early 50s who walked her way out of obesity. She was at her heaviest weight. She was in pain from arthritis and a torn meniscus. And her 70-year-old mother was out walking her every day. And it was at that low point that she got the dreaded lab results. She was pre-diabetic. Her doctor was ready to medicate her, but she didn't want that future for herself. So she made a decision. She was going to start walking 10,000 steps a day, every day, no excuses. She started slow, tracking every step and pushing her daily total higher each month. And sure enough, the weight started coming off. At first, it was just a few pounds, but eventually her clothes started to loosen. Her blood sugar improved. And by the end of the year, she was down 65 pounds, hitting an average of 13,000 steps a day. And guess what? She wasn't pre-diabetic anymore. And it was all because of walking. It's stories like this that make walking look like a magic button for fat loss, something so simple. I love teaching that kind of stuff. But there's something most people don't realize. There's no single answer to how much fat you'll lose from walking. Two people can walk the same distances at the same speed for the same number of days and get completely different results. That's because walking doesn't burn a fixed amount of fat. It burns a range. And that range can swing wildly depending on a few key factors. So let's take a look at the biggest ones. And by the end of this video, you'll know whether or not you too can lose as much as 65 pounds in less than a year simply by walking. So let's start with one of the strongest factors, which is whether you're a beginner or an experienced walker. If you're new to walking, every step you take costs your body energy. That's because your muscles haven't learned the movement pattern yet, so they fire extra fibers that they don't actually need, which raises your energy burn. That creates what researchers call mechanical inefficiency. And it can actually burn 10 to 15% more calories for the same walk compared to someone with more experience walking. This is why beginners often see faster drop, especially in fat, during their first 4 to 6 weeks. In addition, your body weight also changes your fat loss results right from the start. Heavier adults burn significantly more energy with every step because it takes more work to move. Researchers show this can nearly double the energy cost of a walk compared to someone that's lighter. Age also plays a surprising role as well. Adults in their 50s, 60s, and 70s often burn more calories walking the same speed as someone younger. And that's because their movement is less mechanically efficient, causing the energy cost to go up. So even though aging slows other areas of the metabolism, the calorie burn from walking can actually be higher, not lower. Now, once you know how your starting point affects fat loss, the next major factor is your pace. The best goal is to spend as much time as possible in what is called zone 2. Zone 2 is the intensity where your body burns the highest amount of fat per minute. It feels like a steady, brisk walk where you can talk, but you can't sing, and your breathing is noticeably heavier. For most adults, zone 2 lands around 3 to 3.5 miles per hour if you were to look at a speed, or 100 to 120 steps per minute. At that pace, your body burns 30 to 50% more fat than it does at a slower zone 1 pace. You can measure it. Just start the clock for a minute and see how many steps you take. If you're in 100 to 120 range, you're in zone 2. Timing also makes a measurable difference. Walking before your first meal in a fasted state before you eat forces your body to rely on stored fat because there isn't any new glucose coming in. Studies show this shift can increase the fat you burn during the walk by 57%. You can also enhance fat burning by walking immediately after a meal, but it works through a different mechanism. A 10 to 20 minute stroll within 30 minutes of eating lowers the insulin spike that happens after a meal and clears triglycerides that came from your food much more quickly. And it reduces how much fat your body stores from that specific meal by 10 to 20%. Finally, there's one more factor people rarely talk about. As your body gets used to walking, it becomes more efficient at it. This is something scientists call adaptive thermogenesis, which simply means your metabolism learns how to save energy. The same walk that once burned 200 calories might only burn 160 after a few months. That's how plateaus form. And the only way to keep burning fat at the same pace is to change something. Your speed, your incline, or how you spread your walks out throughout the day or throughout the week. So remember, if you've been walking for a while, the amount of fat that you burn can actually go down unless you mix those factors up a little bit. Now that you understand the choices that change the result, the next step is knowing what those results usually look like. If you're walking less than 150 minutes a week, your fat loss will sit on the lower end, more around 0 to 2 pounds of fat per month. Still good, just understand that's more the reality of what is typically seen. The weekly stimulus simply isn't strong enough to consistently reach into stored fat. Then once you reach the 150 to 300 minute a week mark, the results really begin to climb. Most adults in this range lose 2 to 4 pounds of fat per month, as long as they stay steady with their pace and with their frequency. And then when you walk over 300 minutes, right, just for reference, per week, your body moves into the high fat loss range. And that often lands between 4 to 7 pounds of fat a month. But it still depends on how many of the fat multiplying choices from your routine that you're using. And then there's belly fat. Walking is uniquely effective at shrinking the midsection because it goes after the deeper fat behind your abdominal wall, that visceral fat that presses outward and gives the stomach its roundness. Visceral fat is a highly active tissue, and it responds quickly when insulin is lower and oxygen use is higher. Walking creates both of those conditions, which is why research shows 10 to 26% reductions in visceral fat over 12 weeks of steady walking. And those reductions often appear before major changes on the scale. You lose inches before weight actually goes down. As the deeper fat begins to shrink, your abdominal wall has less pressure pushing against it, and your waistline starts pulling inward from the inside out. That's why many adults see 1 to 2 inches off their waist in the first month when they're walking in the moderate to higher weekly ranges, and more inches usually come off over the next several weeks as the visceral fat continues to fall. So now that you know how much fat you can burn by walking, the next step is getting more fat burning power out of every step that you take. We just talked about if you change that frequency and that intensity, that incline, the timing, those factors prevent you from plateauing. So in my other video that has now been seen by well over 1 million people, I break down 8 simple walking hacks that turn an ordinary walk into a fat burning routine without adding extra time or extra effort. And in it, you're going to learn one trick that can increase the amount of calories you burn by as much as 50% for the same number of steps, and an interval method that triggers an afterburn effect that can last up to 48 hours after the walk, and the upgrade that can burn more than twice the fat of a flat walk without running a single step. So if you want walking to work harder for you, this is the next video for you. I'll include a link to that here. Click to watch it next, and I'll see you there.